The parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14. And the key text here for us is, I think, this one. And if you'll notice, it's got a context. The context, the 10 virgins, is right before this. You had the 5 wise virgins, the 5 foolish virgins, the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins. And then after this, you have a discussion of the final judgment and what that's going to look like. So this falls well within the context of what we're talking, of what Jesus is when he says, "This is the kingdom. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods." And I think as we've looked at these different parables and we've kind of gotten an understanding of how the parables work, how the different elements of the parables work, there are a couple of important points that occur within this parable. We've got our man going into the far country. And I think you're referencing Jesus. I think he's got the servants that he gives his money, he gives his valuables to, his goods to. You're looking at Jesus' disciples. Not necessarily these 12 here, but all of Jesus' disciples. Any that are there, that are present then, and those that are to come. All of his servants. This far country, I think, is heaven. And I think what he's referencing is, he's referencing him, he's going to be going back into heaven. The crucifixion is not far. All of that is not far off from this point. The distribution of talents, the endowment of gifts, the endowments of abilities, the endowments of resources that we receive, the blessings and the grace that we receive, and our abilities and the need to spread and spread that, to share that with others. And I think the return of the man, the return of this Lord that's gone into this far country, the return, I think, is the second coming. And if you think about it, the 10 virgins, that's about Jesus coming back. And then we have the final judgment right after this. And that's telling us how the judgment's going to look like, with Jesus coming the final time. So I don't think I'm too far outside of the context of what we have happening here. The accounting, the judgment. The prophets reported, improvement of gifts, the laying up of treasures, the gathering of treasures, and you have Jesus later on in John 14, 15, and 16 talking about producing fruit for the kingdom. And what happens to every vine that doesn't produce fruit? What happens to it? It gets pruned. It gets cut off. The prophets reported, reprovements, the buried talent. The man that buries that talent. I think you're looking at, I love the word slothful. It's a great word. A slothful servant. Someone that has not used their talents. They've not worked for the kingdom. The joy of the Lord, the rewards in heaven, the outer darkness, punishment of the wicked. The faithful servant, and here I don't think we're going too far to talk about the faithful servants. We're talking about faithful Christians, those that have grown fruit, those that have produced much fruit for the kingdom, those that have worked. And the last one, of course, the unfaithful servant, those Christians that bury their talents. And that's important. We're going to look at that, and I think this is an important point in the parable. And see if you don't agree with me on this. But let's move into the parable itself. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country. Notice we have a man that received 5 talents, one of the servants received 2, and to another 1. Now I'll acknowledge, when I was a younger kid, much younger, and I was first told this, I thought, how utterly unfair is that distribution? Well, of course the guy that has 5 talents. Because in my mind, I was actually thinking of it as talents as being, what abilities, what you can do, things you can do. I've got a talent to play a guitar. I've got a talent to play the drums, or someone has a talent they can juggle things or whatever. Well, it's not exactly correct. I mean, I think the talents do apply to that, but what's actually being discussed here is money, resources. These talents actually have a monetary value attached to them. When I learned that, I thought, well, how horribly unfair. A guy that's got 5 talents and 2, well, of course he's able to make more. He got 2 talents, he's able to make more. Now keep in mind, I was about 10 or 11 years old, so don't get too hard on me. But as I grew older, and for this specific to this, what is the actual value of a talent? Now, when you're starting talking about money values back in the first century, you're getting into some really slippery waters at that point. Because you've got this thing called inflation, you've got all sorts of stuff about how this, so it's really hard to put like a monetary value on something like that. But you know what? I tried anyway. So I went to a few different places, and here's what the general thinking is of what a talent meant. And a talent during this period of time was approximately 75 pounds of silver, give or take. Some places a bit more, some places a little less. Now I went to this cute little calculator thing online, and it said the value of silver by the pound. Actually, they do it by the ounce, but I didn't know that. I was like, I really don't want to do the calculations of ounce to pounds. I wasn't up for that. So I found another place. So if you had 75 pounds of silver by today's market, that's $25,987 and 50 cents. I'm sorry, and 50 cents. That's about how much it'd be. Now, how much buying power would that have back in the day? Well, for that, we got to look at something a little different. So, during that period of time, a denarii, which was a single coin, a denarii, 1 denarii was what you would pay a workman for 1 day's of wage. So the average work guy, now this doesn't include rich people and the rich of that day, because of course you know how that all works, but the average worker, he could make about a denarii a day. A talent of silver was equivalent or considered to be about 6,000 denarii. So now if you do a quick calculation, and again, I wasn't going to sit there and try to figure out weekends and days off and all that other stuff, so I just took 365 days a year, right? I know I've included Sundays and Saturdays, but then back in the day, they didn't give you as many vacations. Well, that depends. There's a lot of argument with that. Anyway, I did 365 days. You do that multiplication, and what you end up with is that's about 16 years of work to get 6,000 denarii. 16 years. Now, if you're like me, you're kind of going, well, oh, okay, what does that mean? Well, let's look at that in buying power today. So according to the government, back in 2022, the average wage, that's everybody, they took everybody, everybody all lumped up together, the average wage was about $29.55 an hour. Some people make less, some people make a whole lot more than that, but that's the average, that's the median average. Well, you do some mathematication on that one, 8-hour day, 236, give or take, 40-hour week, $1,182. A year at that amount is $56,000, well, let's call it $57,000. Yes, I'm not including Social Security and taxes and all that other stuff, just straight up multiplication. So that's about the buying power of 56. So you had, in a one day, the buying power of about $236. Not a bad amount of money. Multiply that by 16 years, you've almost got $1 million. Now, why did I take all this time to point this out? Because what we're looking at, even 1 talent is a lot of money. And 1 talent is a lot of resources. 1 talent, if I had $900,000 that someone it's almost like Jesus said, as the man was getting ready to leave, he gave one guy 5 big bags of money. He gave another guy 2 big bags of money, and he gave the last guy 1 big bag of money. It's a lot of money. The audience that was listening to him would have known that. They would have understood, wow, we're talking like king stuff here. Kings had talents. Not average people had talents. Kings had talents. I mean the monetary aspect of it. I would argue that kings rarely have any sort of useful abilities, but that's another conversation. Even one talent was enough. So if I had $900,000 that somebody walked up and gave me, if I could actually exercise a little bit of control, I could put that in a bank. I did a little looking. I did a little digging around just for funsies. The best interest rate I could find was 4%. And that was in some strange bank where they don't actually have any sort of physical presence. It's all online. And they could give you these special CDs for 4%. Well, that's $3,600 annually. That's not a lot of money, but it's some, isn't it? So the thrust of this is we're talking about each one of these guys got more than enough money to do something with it. Each one of them did. And we need to understand this. 1 Corinthians 6, when Paul is talking to the Corinthians, he points this out to them. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. We are bought with a greater price. The amount of value that's been placed in us is beyond price. And we should act accordingly. Now I'm going to point this one out to you too. Notice this. And they that had received the 5 talents went and traded with some and made them other 5 talents. Now he did a lot. Trading is not an easy thing to do. You got to figure out the markets. You got to figure out what people want. You know, like Jim, you had your pharmacy back. So if you're buying drugs that you're getting those drugs, the pharmacy drugs that nobody wants, you're not making any money. You got to know the markets. You got to know what people are interested in. You know, you're not going to go out and get, if I go, like what's the joke? Trying to sell ice to Eskimos, right? I mean, you got your wrong markets. You got to have the market right. You got to know a lot of stuff. This is hard work, which is what this man did. And he achieved, I mean, he had really great gains. He pulled it off, man. He knocked it out of the park. The next guy. Now, we don't know what he did. He didn't tell us. But we know that he gained 2 more himself. I don't know what he did. But whatever he did, he gained some more. But now our last guy, the guy that had the 1 talent, what did he do? He buried it. He went and digged into the earth and hid. He digged and he hid his Lord's money. Now, it's easy for me as a child to sit there and think, well, how unfair that one man gets more than another. But really, all of them got the resources necessary to do what needed to be done. Now, here's the other part of this. We have a tendency to place value on things. We place, and no, all apologies to Alan, and I'm not, I mean, this is a general thing that I'm talking about here. We place a lot of value upon people that are up in a pulpit preaching. And I'm not saying there's not value to that. I'm not saying that's not important. I'm not saying that's not necessary. Don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. But that's not the be-all, end-all of it. Let's do a calculation of how many people could Alan or any preacher reasonably reach at any one time. I mean, with the internet today, who knows? But it's a very scattered shot approach. The personal evangelism that you do, so how many people are in here? 60, 70? whatever. Let's say 50 people. If each person in here went out and talked to one individual, what do you think your success rate would be? How successful would that be? Let's go 20%. Let's say 20 people respond, right? That's 10 people. Then you all 50, you go out again and you talk to 50 more people. Well, now we've got 20 people. And now we've got 70 people going out and talking, and then they're having a success rate of 10%, so that's 7 people. And then we add that back in. Do you see where I'm going with this, or do I have to stretch it out further? Because I'm about to reach the end of my mathematical abilities at this point to be able to do this in my head. How many of you are skilled at building homes? How many of you are skilled at cleaning houses? How many of you are skilled at baking? How many of you are skilled at farming? How many of you are skilled at abilities that you say, well, how does that apply to the Lord's work? I'll tell you how it applies to the Lord's work. You have shut-ins that need help with cleaning. And here's the deal. You can say, well, you're a professional cleaner. Well, you sort of. The school pays me. Well, now I can't use the example I suppose I was going to use. Well, I'm going to use it anyway. You can be mad at me all you want, Mom. So I come in and clean the house. Okay. I've cleaned the house. My mother comes in and cleans the house. It looks clean. Now, I don't know if any of you remember Miss Elsa. Some of you might remember Miss Elsa. She did work like that on this as a kind of a, we'd have called that a side gig nowadays. She came into your home. You knew it was clean. You knew it had been clean. There was no doubt in your mind. The funniest thing I ever saw in my life, I laughed so hard I almost busted my gut, was watching Mom had a big party coming in one time, and she asked Miss Elsa to come in and clean her home. And Mom had already cleaned before Miss Elsa had arrived. And then she found more stuff. She'd go, oh, dust, dust. And she'd be sweeping, oh, dust, dust, dust. And just sweeping along. I laughed, so I'm about to start laughing now. That was so funny. That's a skill, people. And it's a skill that some people are going to need. And it does serve the church. It can help God's word. It can grow the kingdom. I don't care if you could just run a lawnmower. This yard out here needs to be taken care of. This church building needs to be taken care of. There's everything, all of these things come together. Notice, Romans 12. For I say, though the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly, than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according to God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, and all members have not the same office. For we being many are one body in Christ, and every one member one of others. Now listen. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the portion of faith, or ministry, let us wait on our ministering, or he that teacheth on teaching, or he that exhorteth on exhortation, he that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth with diligence, he that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. There is a place for all of that, and it's all necessary. There are some people that can comfort. There are some people that can do a whole lot of things. There are some people that only have one skill, but I'm here to tell you, if you're not using that skill, then the church is lessened. This is a much longer one, and I know to get it all to fit in, I had to... But this is 1 Corinthians 12. And notice, for the body is one and hath many members, and all the members of one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. Now I want you to skip down. And if the ear shall say, because I am not the eye, I am not of the body, as it therefore not of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where were the hearing? If the whole body were hearing, where were the smelling? But now hath God set the members, every one of them, in the body, as it hath pleased him. Now here's the thing. And you say to yourself, well, what does this have to do with this parable? What if all of us were 5-talent men? You would think, wow, that'd be great, wouldn't it? And I would tell you, no, probably not as great as you think it would be. Because that 1-talent man had something to offer as well. I don't know what it was. You know why I don't know what it was? Because he didn't even try. That's why I don't know. Christ has left us a work to do. We are to do this work according to our abilities, but we have all we need to succeed. And that's an important thrust that we have to understand. We have all that we need to succeed. And this parable shows us this. So, time continues, time comes to fruition, and after a long time the Lord of these servants cometh and reckoneth with them. Final judgment. The return of Jesus. And there's a reckoning. How have you done? What have you produced? Now, we do not know when Jesus is coming back. Matthew 13:32. But of that day and of that hour knoweth no man. No, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Now, if you're really quick to note that I used Mark, but that's also in Matthew too. And it's not too much before what we're seeing here in this parable. Jesus has a long, big discussion about that. We don't know when he's returning. Peter writes about that in his letters. We don't know. He's going to come as a what? A thief in the night. Of course, you know, the thing there is if you know when a thief's coming, you're going to lock him out. You're going to prepare. You're going to be waiting up. We don't know. 2 Corinthians 5. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the thing done in his body according to that he hath done. Catch it? What he's done, whether it be good or bad. Ecclesiastes 12, the very last bits of it. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring, listen to it again, every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Now, I'm not talking about salvation by works. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about that we have something to do, though. We have business to be about. Now, here we have this. And he that had the 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents. Now notice this. I will make thee rule over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. There's his reward. 5-talent man, I've gained 5 talents. He went out and traded. He worked hard. Stayed up late, probably. Worked hard. He got there. I will make thee a rule over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. That first servant was found to be faithful. He'd used his talents. 1 Corinthians 4, let a man so account of us as of the mysteries of Christ, and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. It was not the number of talents that really mattered, I don't think. Because, I mean, let's face it, God has all of it anyway. So, he's not looking for a return in the way we think about that. We want to hear these words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Now notice this. Sorry about the spacing on that one, but here's our second guy. He's got 2 talents and he brings back 2. Now, what does he say? Behold, I have gained 2. What does the Lord say? Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. Okay. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. That man received the exact same reward that the 5-talent man received. Only the 5-talent man brought back more talents. He gained 5 talents. This guy only gained 2. Again, my math being what it is, that's less than half, is it not? Those of you with a little more math skill than I've got. But he got the exact same reward. Now let's imagine that the 1-talent man had gone out. Let's imagine that he'd tried. And he said, Lord, I tried. I've got my 1 talent and I'm going to bring you back half a talent. What do you think he would have gotten? I'm going to suggest if he'd tried with his 1 talent, he'd have come back with 1 talent. But that's not what he did, is it? Notice, the second servant was also declared to be faithful. The second servant did not have as many talents. He didn't have as many resources as the first, but he was faithful and received the exact same reward. You've only got that 1 talent, use it. God has never and will never require more than He's given us. Think about it. What has He given us? He's given us salvation. At what cost? At what price? His Son. Now, what value of those that are in here that are mothers and fathers? What value would you place on your firstborn? Name me a monetary figure. You grandparents in here, name me a monetary figure that you would put on giving away or sacrificing your first grandchild. Who in here has a value for that? You don't. I don't. It's priceless. My secondborn, priceless. My thirdborn, priceless. My fourthborn, priceless. My fifthborn, priceless. My first grandchild, and I hope more to come, priceless. There's no value I can place on that, and that's what God gave for us. So we've got to ask our question, how are we using our talents? How are we using those resources that have been given to us by God? How are we using them to gain fruit for the kingdom? So, then we come to our last guy. And he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and again, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. There's always in literature, there's a kind of trope that I love. I've always loved this trope, and you see it right here, of where someone is convicted by what they say. Their very own words convict them. This man is saying to his Lord, I knew you to be someone that expects gain where you've not even put in effort or work. I knew you to be someone where you expect to gather where you haven't strawed. I knew you to be someone who expects to reap where you haven't sown. So whatever made this man think that this was going to be acceptable? Now, I will point out in a couple of commentaries I looked at, they were saying, oh, he misapplied this. No, because the Lord Himself says, yes, that's exactly what kind of Lord I am. And let's be honest with ourselves. That's exactly the kind of God that we serve. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. Jesus makes it plain to him. What does He say? He says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And so it is. But God expects all to repent. God expects all to obey and to be baptized in Jesus' name. He expects this of everyone. And you can pretend all you want that God has no part in your heart and has no place in your existence. But that's not how it works. But how this man thought this was going to be acceptable, I haven't a clue. But there it is. He's convicted by his own words. Now, I'm going to point this out, and it's well worth pointing out. The one man more or less blamed his failure on God. Many people today make the statement that God is so hard, He's so tough, that there's no way you can faithfully serve Him. Well, again, as I hope I pointed out to a great deal of the percentage of the time on this class, to show you that a talent is a lot of resources. It's a lot of value. It's a lot of money. It's more than was necessary. There was 101 things that this man could have done to have gained if he had that much resource at his fingertips, which he did. And here's the other part. He worked hard trying not to use his talents. Now notice this, the Lord answers him. Keep this part in mind, but let's go here. The Lord answers him, you wicked and slothful, love that word, slothful servant. Thou knewest that I reap where I sow not, and gatherest where I have no straw. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I would have received mine own with usury, or interest. Now, usury today has a concept of unfair interest, but that's not the Greek word here. It's just interest. Now, we could take, as I pointed out to you before, you could find on a bank. So what he's talking about is take it to the bank. Take it to a bank. Although you didn't really have banks back then, but money changers or people that change out money. Take it to the bank, and you could have just let the money sit. And that's all you would have had to have done. You'd have had to take in the bag that I've given you, carried it down to the money exchangers and given it to them, and they could have lent out that money at interest. Now, I don't know what John does at the bank, but I bet at some point he handled stuff like this. No? She's saying no. Okay. Well. Oh, okay. Anyway, there's people at the bank. You go down there and you can give them, if you're going to give them a big bunch of money, what do? You put it in that account and then you get whatever. I think you don't get 4%. You get a whole lot less. But, so that comes out. Now, let me point this out to you. Think about this. How many of you all here have dug a ditch? Dug something down. Is that easy work? I've dug a few ditches. I've dug a few holes in my time. It's not easy work. We had these post hole things, and we used to have this little weird, had like a scoop thing at the bottom and had these big long things. You go, and you dig that thing out, and then thunk, and you dig that out, and by the time you got about, like Coy's over there, like, yeah, I remember doing. The greatest thing at our house Dad ever got, I thought, for his tractor, I thought this was this brilliant machine. This big, looked like a big drill bit or screw on the thing, and it would just throw that dirt up, and I thought, oh, that's nice. We had a problem with our septic tank, and we had the guy come out, and he came out, and I said, well, and he starts digging, and man, he cut that hole, and he dug this really nice, big, deep hole in about 20 minutes. It was a lot of work. He got up out of there tired. He was sweaty. He was worn out. Not easy work digging. Literally, this man spent more effort hiding the talent he had than what it would have taken for him to gain some value from it. He put more effort and time and energy into hiding the talent than it would have taken for him to gain money from it. Because all he would have had to have done was have handed it to a man and said, here, you do all the hard thinking and working on this. I want my percentage. And they would have said, all righty. And they'd have given him back his percentage. Now, it wouldn't have been much, but it would have been something. He spent more effort. I read an interesting article a couple of years back, and it was actually talking about, you know the old saying, crime doesn't pay, right? You've heard that saying. Well, the premise of the article is they actually sat and they were looking at, does crime pay? Does it actually pay? Now, when you're on the upper edge of crime, actually, unfortunately, yeah, it can pay, and it can pay really well. But if you're the 9-to-5 kind of criminal, the kind of criminal that's just out there doing his stuff, they did some calculations. Literally, many of these, the vast majority of your criminals, and unless you're talking about the big kingpins and the big drug lords and all those people, not so with them. But if you're the 9-to-5 kind of criminal, the day-to-day criminal, more often than not, they made less than minimum wage. And in some of them, they did some calculations. These poor guys were making about $2 to $3 an hour. Now, think about the risk. These guys are risking long terms in jail. They're risking danger. They're risking death. Because sometimes, like if you have a job dispute at McDonald's, you might go on strike or you might quit your job and go get a job at Wendy's or something else. But you have a job dispute down at the local criminal place. Their approach to dealing with employee problems is a little more lethal than most. Great risk for very little reward. And they made the point that many of the problems of these guys have no ability to decide to value risk versus gain. No impulse control. This guy spent more time, and the Lord himself says to him, gives him a perfectly acceptable, here's how you could have done it. But he didn't. He made an active choice to hide, knowing what the expectation was. Yes? You absolutely can. So first off, he said that everything I've said is spot on. I just want to make sure everybody heard that one. But he went on to say that the root of this guy is dishonest. And I think you're right. There's a dishonesty. He showed himself to be a pretender and not a true servant of this man. And therein lies the slothfulness, therein lies your laziness, therein lies all of that. But that's not dishonesty. Yes, he is being dishonest. He's being dishonest in many ways with himself. He's being dishonest with his Lord. He's being dishonest with his fellow servants. I mean, let's go on with that. There are few things in this world worse when you're working in a job, when you got that one guy that does not pull his weight. And if you've worked for any length of time, you've run up against somebody like that. And often they're really good at kind of jawboning and talking and being all up with everybody. But they don't pull their weight. And it drags everybody else down. I'm going to tell you that can hurt the church when you have people not pulling their weight, not doing their fair share. Now, yes. He's saying that your one talent, or the one talent guy is saying, I can't. And what we need to be saying is, I'll try. And I think at that point, like you say, Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit, all of this starts to kick in on us. And see, here's the thing. Now it's not in this parable, but I think I've more than shown that in these parables we need to use the whole counsel of God. I think I've got that well established. But here's the thing. We're not in this alone. It's not like we've got this and all right, good luck. We've got the grace of God. We've got the power of God behind us. We've got our fellow Christians behind us. We've got all of this. Well, Romans 11:12. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God on them which fell severity, but towards thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. Otherwise, thou also shalt be cut off. Now, in Revelations 3, chapter 3, well, several of the chapters, you have the letters to the churches, right? Right to the angel at the church at here and there and wherever. So you had one of those, and this is the one that is the most frightening to me in some ways. But it makes a lot of sense. Look, Jesus says, I know thy works, that thou art neither what? Cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. And honestly, there aren't too many worse taste in your mouth, and how water tastes bad is weird to me, but there it is. When you're expecting cold water, and what do you get? Lukewarm. Or you're expecting really, really hot water. Now, I love coffee. And it's funny, I can drink coffee hot. I actually kind of like iced coffee. But you know, some people are like, no. You lost me there. So apparently I'm no longer spot on. So, okay. But I can drink cold coffee. You know what I can't drink? That coffee that's like in between. It's weird. It doesn't taste right. It's awful. Well, there you are. That's what happened to that's what happened to that one talent man. Now, I want us to key in on this important part. And I'm going to actually back up. I haven't done this before, but I need to back up one thing. Right here. He worked hard to not do his Lord's will. I firmly believe this. It takes effort to not follow God's will. And it takes a lot of effort to not follow God's will. And it is my firm belief that those that end up in hell end up there because they have made a conscious choice to go there. Look, I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy thing. It's something that's always troubled me. The existence and reality of hell troubles me. Always has. But over my life, I've come to an understanding that people that end up there because they've chosen. They've made an active choice. And this man, it's not like this man, the one talent man, kind of was like, he tried and he tripped and he fell and he lost it, or something happened that's not what happened here. He actively resisted doing God's will. Actively. Well, it looks like I'm out of time, although a bell has not rung. I will point this out. Y'all used to have a bell, but maybe you all are trusting in me and you're like, hey, he's not going to take us too far over. So, there we go. My final word on this is this. Use your talents. I don't care what you've got, because there's stuff that certain people can do that others can't. And if we're all not working, or we're all not using our talents, then the church is weakened, greatly weakened. Now, don't forget, next week, because we have the Christmas thing, or don't we? Or we'll have class next Wednesday? Yes, okay. So I've got the high sign. Yeah, yes, okay, good, because I prepared for it. So the guy that keeps knocking at the door at midnight, and the woman who won't leave a judge alone. And these are the friend at midnight, that's Luke 11, 5 through 13, and the unjust judge, Luke 18, 1 through 8. I want you to notice how a negative presentation, a negative or a troublesome representation of someone is used to teach a very valuable lesson about persistence. All right. As always, thank you guys. I appreciate you so much. It's been this class is an absolute joy. Thank you.